teacher is the author of the book, the Book of Rune Secrets.
Is that backwards on your screen?
No, it's showing the correct way.
Thank.
It's kind of that's what I kind of like to talk to you about. Is what was the what got you into runes in the first place?
My mom was really like she took the Denali Institute course. I don't know if you know of that one. But I think they still run it. I don't know. The website hasn't changed in years, but it was like a mail in course, like correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
And she has volumes like this, like of papers, printouts, huge amounts of material from that course. And she had a mentor who first discovered the runes through Ralph Blum, actually, and then went deeper. And a lot of people rag on Ralph Blum and say, like he just makes stuff up and whatever, and it's just a cash cow to be in the stores. But the thing is, he provides like the rune set, that plastic rune set,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets you interested in the mystic side and exploration and imagination side, which is crucial in my teaching. The imagination side is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then you have to go forward and look like, okay, is there like something historical to this? Is there something accepted to this? And my mom and her mentor went fairly deep into it with the Denali Institute. And I think that you get the title of Aurelian when you graduate from that, which is based on the word Erelaz, an old word that was spelled in runes
Wow, Viking
after
word.
the Aets. Yeah. So that's neat.
Yeah, I've
I don't
I
usually go by a title.
yeah I try to stay away from titles myself. I try to think about myself I'm a continuing student. I'm an eternal beginner. That's
For sure.
I feel like that's my preferred way of thinking about things is to think about the process of there's like a Zen Buddhist kind of idea of the beginner's mind, that the beginner's mind is in a state of kind of purity, of innocence, or where it perceives everything very naturally. And as you get more skilled, you start to put these mental layers over things. You
It's
know,
like topography.
yeah,
Yeah,
you start to
that's the word I
create.
use for it.
Yeah,
That's a whole other thing. Like with me, I love Zen. Zen was really useful for very practical meditation, like when my brain wasn't all over the place, when it needed to be here and now. Do
mhm,
the dishes, kind of
yeah,
sweep the floor.
yeah.
Zen is excellent for that.
Chop wood and carry water.
And then after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Um, it's invisible, the kind of truth that you're after. And uh, that to me is part of the Dagaz rune. So for me, the runes as a whole are actually like little puzzle pieces connected together
Hmm.
in like this matrix. And when you take them apart, each one kind of refers to little bits and pieces of the world, religions, and occult ways, and spirituality, and psychology, and philosophy. But um, they're not good. Like one rune, this is people's instinct towards bind runes. One rune doesn't rule them all. One rune
Yeah,
is just a piece, and it creates problems on its own. That's what a
that's
merkstave is. It's not the upside down meaning of a rune in my teaching. A merkstave is that the understanding that a rune has a positive and a negative implicitly. It's non-dual. It
yeah,
creates its own problems. It is the solution in the problem. Just as a hammer for Thurisaz, everyone's familiar with Thurisaz and Thor's hammer, can create. It's a carpenter's tool, a
yeah.
builder's tool, or it can fight and slay giants and stuff. Um, that's a tool and a weapon. So it's it's excellent. to show people the merc stave there is not it's how you have it's what you make of the rune. And if it's imbalanced, if you're using it too much as a weapon or thinking of it too much as a tool, then you're using it as a merc stave, regardless of how you draw it or flip it upside down or.
Would you explain
like
what a merc stave is to?
Merc stave is what popularly amongst many authors and community I've found is the name for an upside down rune, or the negative or shadow meaning of a rune. And there is a way to interpret that's legitimate in a kind of black and white, like this rune is positive when it's up and negative when it's down. But what I discovered was the non-dual way is like a bit more like the yin-yang kind of thing, right? Like you have each rune has that yin-yang center, like it's there's a little bit of yang in the positive and a little bit of yin in the negative.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing with the runes too. I stopped using negative and positive runes a few years ago, like quite a few years ago. But I was on the verge of not doing it when I wrote the book, and in the new book that have been trying to write, and books can be tough.
I applaud you for publishing one, by the way. I mean, I haven't managed to do it myself yet, but I'm hoping to.
Bleeding on the page is, and then cutting the stuff that doesn't work, like it's hard, but has to be done. As I have like a big urge to share what I can of what I learned.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Odin hung himself by his little toe from the tree to plucked out his own eye to gain the knowledge of the runes.
Oh, and the well of Mimir, yeah, past and present.
So
yeah, he was after it. He sacrificed himself to himself, his higher self.
And but that's also what you're doing, or what you have done. In a certain sense, it's like you're growing into your higher self by trying to relate to yourself with the help of runes. The world,
definitely they're a crutch for me. I don't do tarot or anything. The runes are really it, like in a way.
Well, let me just share a few. I just have I was looking around when I was looking around just a little while ago. I have this notebook where I have various, like, I do little drawings and things.
Yeah.
And this is when I was studying runes. And
beautiful handwriting or calligraphy. I don't know what you would call it with the runes.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called with the runes, but so with the runes, I started to notice that they had a particular. I posted a picture, but I started to notice.
You can do that with it, yeah, for sure.
And that it's given is actually just the order that it occurs in a calendar.
It's very very well thought out. There's ways to go into the symbols and the order of the symbols, many ways to approach it, and you can reconstruct and learn so much from doing just that. Germania says that the people symbol when you
I mean, that's exact. Basically, the Phoenicians were a big trade. They were a Mediterranean trade empire, and they eventually
the moon landing, whether you believe in that or not, I personally do, but I know people are confused. Or anything that exists of human creation was someone's imagination at some point.
Exactly.
I mean that's an amazing thing to truly understand how because 5,000 years later the pyramids still stand. They're the only ancient wonder that is really there, and they didn't exist at some point.
That's true. Someone had to make them. And when I was thinking, so this shows backwards for me, but this is the Torah. So the Hebrew Torah, in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, at the very beginning, there's a God. The name Elohim is mentioned 32 times, and in the tradition, which is the word Kabbalah. The word Kabbalah means tradition. 32 is an important number because there were 10 sayings of God. He said 10 things, and then he did 22 other things. The 22 other things he did are the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And the Elder Futhark is 24 characters rather than 22. But that corresponds much better to a zodiac cycle or a something that has to do with 12 months or
nature. Yeah, like an orbit, a grounding kind of Earth-oriented people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. In that, like, I think that there's a reason that you have Yera and Eoaz together, kind of in the middle, like one orbiting the other. You've got the axis of the Earth and that's the 12th and 13th rune.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got this kind of like every other rune orbits around this axis and horizontal kind of orbit of Yera, and like it's so obvious that Yera is referring kind of that seasonal as a Kenaz, right? Yeah. Kenaz, and then like a Merkstave Kenaz, almost like how history works. Like you learn, and then history like disappears, and you forget. Like that's the cycle of time, right? Like
it seems that way. It seems that humanity goes through these processes of learning and forgetting, and that we're not the first ones. You know,
I think that the Graham Hancock says we're a people with amnesia.
Yeah,
we're and I liked that saying. I say in my book that history is a master of covering its own tracks.
That's a good way to say it.
And that's to say it's meant to be a mystery. It's meant to. There's a purpose to the mystery, and with the runes, that's very much the main thing. There's a purpose to the mystery, and when people say they're a beginner with the runes, I don't know much about them. There's a big difference between that attitude and, oh, I know all about them. You know, like I know this and that about the Old Norse, and I know, I'm not going to give examples because I don't want to tick anybody off. Like the kinds of knowledge that there's so much academics that you could put behind this stuff as well. But the thing that is really fascinating is that the runes are not a dead language. They're not dead symbols at all. People are still using them, and that's worth something. There's no ancient thing about them at all. In a way, they come from that trackless land of history that we're talking about, but they're being used today more than ever and discussed. And the meanings, when you say wealth, what does wealth mean with Fehu? What does mobile property indicate? Cattle, or if you talk about Thurzaz as like a weapon or a hammer, or like what does that mean about us that we're talking about that? You can like really go into levels of like self-examination with these tools, and that's kind of what divination is. I want to find out about myself. I want to create a mirror so that I can see my shadow, so that I can see my reflection, see my destiny. Right.
One of the interesting things to me is that what you were saying about people basically they have a point of view about how much they know about a subject. And most people have decided after kindergarten, I know all that I need to know about the alphabet. I know all that I need to know about letters. But the thing is that letters, the communication, and that is the method by which humans translate thought vibration into physical reality. And when you're talking about the relation to imagination, language is the literal bridge between the human ability to imagine something and the human ability to create something. Because
we know of Ansus, right? Like the inspiration, the inspired communication, the word, the breath. It means mouth in the later stages of the symbol, and it means gods in the earlier, or ancestral sovereign gods in the earlier manifestations. In the beginning there was the word, and the word was God. Like, it's right there in that subsection of the
right,
runes. They're so interconnected, and because these were Phoenician derivative, uh, there is a kind of like worldly aspect to them. I suspect that they draw from many different places, and each rune was like a teaching of that lens or that view, because you've got some stuff from the Far East. You've got stuff from like Ing, in the rune poem. Ing came from the West and taught the people basically horticulture. Like, it means seed, and he was considered a god for that. But who was this guy, right? Like, I imagine that it was a human, or a human with who had discovered something amazing and was very jacked up on that, very elevated.
yeah.
I like saying jacked up. I just throw humor in. I'm a silly teacher. It's the Zen part of me, really.
I feel like one of the
You know what I
things
mean?
about the ancient people is that, or that we should understand about our ancestors. We have a very expressive culture today, where we express things in a lot of detail, and we expound on things. But back then, a long time ago, they tried to condense as much as possible into the smallest possible space, and
Speed
so
form, yeah. You
they
had to.
so it's like this is the I Ching reading. I was doing an I Ching reading for myself
Yeah,
right
you
before
mentioned.
right before we did this call. This is the only things in an I Ching reading is a unbroken line or a broken line. That's it.
It's like almost Morse code, except even like simpler.
It's
Like,
basically a binary code. It's a
yeah,
very condensed form of knowledge, and the runes, in their own way, they're like this. This is very linear, but the runes are also made of straight lines, but in a not as linear fashion.
well,
They
I always thought, like, you go to my site and I use kind of a more calligraphy font for them, right?
mhm.
Um, and in my newer branding, the sometimes it's a little like more graven. I think that because of what we know about how they were carved into things, you
Mhm.
kind of had to have those straight lines.
Yeah,
But nowadays we don't have to be so rigid with it. I mean, there is
yeah,
a little bit of mathematics to it, but I always found that was lacking. You couldn't fit them into the grid or the star that you really wanted to, without like kind of um, having to take liberties.
mm.
Like making a line too short here, or a rune too low compared to the other ones. Like, it just didn't really sit well with my designer side. Like, I'm a designer by trade, and
Mm.
then a musician by self-taught,
Well,
and a writer, right? Like, I kind of, when I went through my phase of like not being able to speak this stuff anymore, I had to go to music, because music is an expression that doesn't require words, but yet can
yeah,
invoke that mystical experience, right? And you were saying you also are
yeah.
into music.
That was the kind of the big thing in my life. I mean, I feel like it still is. It's just that I've redefined myself. I almost defined myself as a musician throughout my 20s, and now that I've turned 30, I feel like I'm redefining myself into following the model of a lot of the ancient teachers, to move more into a role of study and teaching, uh,
Yeah,
of trying to
there's no
help.
reason that we can't do both.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
the
not at the same time. It's hard to shift gears, like I find, but
I think that
yeah.
well, in the old way of learning, they would teach in what they would originally teach what was called the trivium, which was grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and then they would teach you the quadrivium, which was derived from that, which is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And
Mhm.
music is a key to understanding a lot of mathematical relationships and also a lot of linguistic relationships. It's kind of a bridge between math and language, and I feel like it's benefited me a lot.
I love that we call it the universe. It's one of my favorite words, the universe. I prefer it sometimes to like the creator or God or
Mm-hmm.
words that I would use,
Mm-hmm.
but like the universe, like the united verse, the song, the story that's just channeling forward all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I love words, obviously, but these symbols that we use and we take for granted, we're like, oh yeah, the universe. Oh, the universe. It's great. I'm a simple man. What can I say?
Well,
little,
naming
little things really.
names have very powerful connotations and meanings, and the way because essentially everything in the universe is vibratory. Everything is a vibration, and so a type of name, if you call something one thing rather than another, you are actually changing something literal and real about it.
I think because I think of the runes as lenses, like a microscope or a telescope or a gyroscope, or is a gyroscope a thing? I'm
Yeah,
kind of
it's a thing, but it's not a lens.
it's not a lens. Well, okay, maybe there's gyroscopes as well. We're on a like kind of bendy trip with it anyway. But like these mysteries um, do have uh, different like one of the things I've been pondering lately because I'm making this rune course
Mhm.
and it's slides and I obviously I try to keep my definitions on my site like um accurate but like open.
Mhm.
But I find that there's a lot of authors who are coming from other places now that like 12 years ago I that wasn't where I was coming from. Where are they getting this stuff from?
Yeah.
um and some of it is the same, some of it's different. Some of the rune meanings shift over to other runes and get like a
Mhm.
little more confused and um I find myself at odds with that. I feel as if like there's not a right way to think about runes, but there is a useful way to think about runes.
That's true of
Um,
anything almost.
yeah, and what I want to teach in my course is not the right way to think about runes. It is the most useful that I've found way,
Mm.
like a way that actually has impact on your reality, an immediate impact that is measurable.
And
That
I
that's important for something for me. It in my story, my personal story, I was very sick when I was younger, and I had visions and uh, in and out of hospitals, and um, was weakly or weak at some times, and very powerful at others, and or depressed and manic or various like states of being, but like very rapidly in terms of
common for a
how
shaman.
yeah, but in our society you put them in the hospital, you don't like
Right.
put them as a wise person, like uh
But in Africa, they would set you apart as a
maybe
shaman.
yeah, someone would teach me something. Yeah, that would be good. I had to figure it out for myself
Mhm.
largely. Fortunately, there's books, ancient texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Bible, the Quran, the Eastern stuff. That the Tao Te Ching was really useful.
Oh,
Zen teachings.
absolutely.
I've the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads. Like the lists go on. And when I was searching, the I was able to connect all of these into the runes and really find out that like, okay, what Thorson or Freya Aswin or these people who are stuck on the literal meanings and are really invested in the runes before they got super popular. What or the Denali Institute, for instance, the kind of established narrative there, I was able to connect that to wider teachings. So I realized that the runes are a universal thing. They're not just like Norwegian or Scandinavian or Viking, or they're much older. They're much older than that.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with like some of the Norse mythology. There's obviously Woden is a very old god and becomes Odin. Tyr or Tiwaz or Tiw goes back, and
very far.
Frey goes back. And
Tiwaz is an interesting one because Tiwaz is actually the Proto-Indo-European word that became in Greek. It became Theo. It became Deus in Latin. It became Dios in Spanish, and it became Zeus as well. Tiwaz is actually they share the same Proto-Indo-European root word, and so you can see the migration and like that's how far back it's split.
Yeah, and Tiwaz, like, definitely like justice, sacrifice for that justice, truth, and the guiding principle. The thing about Tiwaz is that like we know what's right and wrong. That's why it's shaped like a spearhead, like an arrow. We have that compass. That's the thing, and that's the core of justice, is that we assume that like that has to exist. Our justice system wouldn't work if there wasn't this idea that like within us is this innate spiritual moral compass.
You know, right? What was interesting that came up I did a rune reading for someone the other day, and she is a writer. And I pulled the Tiwaz rune inverted, and then I realized it's like a pen in its inverted shape. It's like the sword, the powerful sword, but in an inverted shape, it's almost like a pen. It's
like or a stylus or something. Yeah,
it's the same thing that is the divider. Like a blade or a sword, like in tarot, the suit of swords is seen as being representing the intellect, because the sword is that which divides things. So the mind is that which
cuts both ways too. Like a double-edged sword cuts. Intellect is not, in my mind, too much of a spiritual quality. My wife lectures me on that sometimes about the difference between being smart and being wise, and I really love her perspective on it, because you can be really, really smart and do horrible things, like, and not care about anyone, right? Like,
plenty of people do.
Smartness is not. It's like not good or bad, really. Like
it's a tool,
but wisdom, I think, is something that we cultivate, and it comes from pain, and its basis really is compassion, and we tend to share it. Whereas I think that intellect, we share our opinions and stuff and intelligence, but sometimes we use it to just gain advantage. It's nature.
Yeah, I think
that's manas. I'm thinking in runes. If I could just flash a rune on the screen, like, I kind of think in runes and I talk about them. I don't like really say the rune. I'm trying to like say what I'm talking about, and we know the shapes a little bit. Like, we're going through some of these runes together, and they all together. I don't think there's a single topic that we couldn't talk about and relate to a few overlapping runes. It's like that. They connect so well.
I think that any given thing, if you could point at anything and you just hold up an object, all 24 runes are applicable in some sense. But their energies are different. So it's like if you're doing a rune if you're drawing a rune for a rune reading, for example, and you pull a rune, and I just pulled blank just a blank rune, Odin.
This one. I got my hammer.
Oh yeah.
Tools.
That's maybe the one that's most applicable to whatever you're thinking about, but it's not the only one that applies.
Mm.
That's because you can use runes. You can boil it down to, you could just stare at one of them. You could stare at Thurisaz all day, or you could spell words with it and write a story. It can be used to do many things, and it's a tool that is I think it's important and powerful for us to realize just how powerful language can be in terms of our ability to shape the world, and in terms of our ability to project our will into the world.
I agree. I think that the careless use of language is something that people overlook too. It's like, well, I'm going to use a just whatever word, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there should be kind of some balance there too. I find there's a tendency to say, well, you can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you can say that. You can mean to say that too. But like, I don't swear anymore. I used to swear like a pirate when I was younger, in colloquial conversation. But I found that like it's harder to express yourself in language if you're always reverting to certain words.
Mm-hmm.
And like with tones, it's just like a grunt, and if you abandon your swear words, your cusses and stuff, uh, you get to a point where you need to find and draw up actually how you feel and explain and express. So there's power in limiting the kinds of language that you use,
Mm-hmm.
as well as power in the language you use. Silences, and just like in music, right? A silence can be like hugely impactful, right? And then
that's a quote. I think Mozart said it, that music was the art of arranging silence.
That's the kind of a, is it Gestalt way of looking at it too, like in design, when you look at these images that like look like one thing in black, and then like the white empty space is another picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's music too. Yeah, good music.
Yeah, well, definitely that's like Mozart, or when you listen to those kind of things, the use of silence is as important as any given note. And one of the things that I grew up playing in the bluegrass community, bluegrass music and stuff like that. My dad was a banjo player
Nice.
in a band, and that's kind of what I grew up around. And in that community, they say that someone's a young player, or they're playing young when they play a lot of notes, and they just don't know when to put a space in there.
Many notes. Remember that from there's, what was it, Amadeus, the movie? Have you seen that one about Mozart?
Actually, I had the opportunity to see it here in Portland, Oregon, at the theater, or at the symphony house, where they played the music live. The orchestra played the music live while the movie was playing. It was amazing.
That's one of my, I wouldn't say top 10, but like I don't really have a top 10. I really like that movie.
It's a great movie.
Beautiful. I was gonna maybe share some of my other side, some of my music I can stream, and maybe give you a tour of like a little couple things that I've been working on.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. On the screen. Since we can screen share, I've been loving this feature of Discord. I'm trying to get everybody on Discord.
Yeah.
So that I can use this.
Discord is
Uh,
really a great. It's one of the best social media things around at this time. I used to be big on IRC chat, like Internet Relay Chat, which
yeah.
in but it doesn't really exist the same way anymore that it did, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Well, it's kind of resurged in Discord. So
Yeah.
this is these are some slides I'm working on. I don't know where they're going exactly. They're very drafty. But one of the things in my survey that I did was ask people what what's your most challenging struggle with the runes, right? And a lot of it was interpreting and memorizing. So, like, how do you learn them? How do you actually interpret them? And I'm like, well, actually, there's a story to the runes. They have a a kind of hero's journey, like the Joseph Campbell
Hmm.
and each one of them kind of waves into the next in this story of spiritual growth and spiritual development and manifestation of heaven on earth, like a prophecy. If you look at them in a certain way, and in the certain way that, like, I learned them, I discovered it while I was writing and investigating them. And maybe that's imagination, but it seems very compelling. Uh,
I actually, I mean, I had the exact same experience. Is that when I started memorizing and studying the runes, and I was like, at first I thought the order of them was inconsequential, or didn't, they were just put in some order, but the order of them is very specific and has to do with how the energies interact of these different symbols. And I think you're right on the money, actually.
this is my first impulse in order to even, I mean, people can learn whatever meanings of the runes that they want, but if we're looking at Rune Secrets, which is a popular site and derived from many popular works, so it's an amalgamation of a good narrative, I think, of meaning. Then we can learn meaning from Rune Secrets, and the notes that I've gathered over 20 years, and apply it in this hero's journey. And the hero's journey actually will help us when we draw three runes together for someone. For instance, you said you were doing a reading. It'll make it easier for us to tell their story or know where they're at
Hmm.
in the hero's journey, in their hero's journey, as they are the hero of their existence, right? They are the main character.
Hmm.
Uh, and we are a minor one for them, and we're a major one for ourselves. As we can get into that with other runes, but yeah, story assistant memorization and interpretation. We know this. Like the oral cultures would memorize encyclopedic volumes of poetry. The bards and skalds and druids would be able to do that, and so I'm just this was what we were talking about earlier. The runes, its secret
Okay.
and mystery. Yeah, I think that's pretty important stuff. Evidence versus imagination. We've got so yeah, this is so the A tier are the three rows. I
Hmm.
typically teach those in my books and with people that there's kind of like a principles, laws, and energies which direct the course of universal affairs, and each A is a representation of, like, whether it's a personal evolution, an evolution of trials, or the evolution of the universe.
How do you
Each,
how do you
each A
think
is
about
like
the how do you think about the three rows? Like how would you sum up each row?
that. For Feihu to Wanzhou, I would sum this up as you're a part of the herd with your initial conditions. You're just wherever you are when you wake up, and you have to go on your own and go through your rite of passage, slay the Auroch, um, endure, survive, find your tools that help you take down the bigger things within you. That these days are the giants. Resolve
Mhm.
your differences with the giants that are bigger than a single individual. Learn how to express yourself and find the words of God, basically. Um, Embark upon your journey, find the path,
Mhm.
right? Gain the experience and the craft, especially your craft, what you're good at, is kind of, or what you get good at by learning, is very important in Kinaz here. And Gebo is your gift, your innate talents, and the sacred union. We have in our heart this idea that we're moving towards finding someone. And I used to say sacred marriage because that was like the words that were very common. But I think that Gebu is more of a sacred union because it can be between people, and it doesn't have to be like a sexual or physical relationship or anything. It's just like sacred getting together between two people, and it's like a something more comes out of that
Have
than.
you ever heard Carl Jung said Carl Jung wrote something about the conjunctio oppositorum. Conjunctio oppositorum means the meeting of opposites. And there's an old Rosicrucian epitaph that says the Holy Grail lies at the conjunctio oppositorum, at the conjunction of opposites. So you will find the great gift at the conjunction of opposites or at the crossroads.
We can get there.
It's,
The Gebu is the great gift, and there's also one down here too, right? Like in Dagaz. Can you see that little red dot? Like, is that
yeah,
distracting?
actually, I can see it pretty. Yeah, it looks fine to me.
I had to practice with this because I was doing like all kinds of funny like little things. The first time I discovered this little red dot.
I didn't even
Uh,
know. How do you even do that?
oh, it's down like here, pointer, and then you have a pointer.
Okay.
And so one show is the reintegration into the fellowship, the celebration and joy from having undergone this particular personal transformation. You come from the herd into the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer like this domesticated, mindless herd for you. It's a community that you can grow and that actually celebrates the wisdom and gifts that you've brought back from your journey. But then, of course, disaster strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everything is going well, and disaster strikes. Hagalaz is there to continue that typical story arc. Uh, if something's going really joyously, then it's not the end because disaster and catastrophe and crisis has to come. But with that opportunity to discover your needs over your desires, and this row is definitely things that are inimical to our personal transformation in the first ayat. Like Hagalaz doesn't really. You might be wanting to have a picnic that day, and it starts to hail. This
Yeah.
is the meaning of Hagalaz is hail.
Hailstones. Yeah.
It doesn't really care about your picnic. Like it's inimicable. It's indifferent.
The force of
Um,
nature.
and meet your needs. You can hold your breath all you want, but you need to breathe. And you're going to. This is another thing, right? You're trapped in an identity, your I. We use this word and this symbol a lot, and it means pretty much some of the same stuff. The focus of the self, and the prison of the here and now in after a sense, like the stuckness that we are always trying to escape from with distraction and ego and identity and whatnot. These are like things that happen to us in the course of um, our journey here on Earth. That it doesn't matter who we are or where we are in life. It's just gonna happen. Then we get to kind of a Yera, which is like a seemingly gentler rune, but we see how it eradicates history
Mm-hmm.
and marches on despite you getting old and wanting to be younger. you know uh so it doesn't care either. It's just gonna throw that slower challenge of the progression of time at you. The mysteries of death. The U is typically considered the world tree or the death tree and the afterlife here. Death is inevitable, right? It's one of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a leap of faith that we take in that, like, this is not meaningless.
Yeah. The evergreen.
Perthrow.
The evergreen leads
Perthrow
to
is,
the
yeah,
gambling box.
yeah. The gambling box is risk and also play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can say the universe is meaningless, or we can say the universe is playful. We can say the universe was made by chance, or we can say actually it was made by luck. Maybe there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference, you know. The divine protection that comes with a leap of faith, right? The divine connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one means victory, right? But it's also a kind of mastery over oneself. Mastery is inevitable. Victory is inevitable.
Mm.
And I think that's a really positive, like Wonjo, a really positive ending to that story. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain kind of mastery, but with that mastery, we have Tiwa's justice. And that's that not everybody's mastered, or they've mastered things that are counter to the aims of this particular row, the evolution of life, and that justice is something we need to use our mastery of ourselves towards. We must be just, and we must seek justice for others who are more defenseless. This represents the old warrior, where Algis is kind of what they painted on their shields for protection. Tiwaz is kind of the spear there.
Yeah.
Odin is pierced by the spear, um, pierces himself, or the Havamal kind of suggests. But
Yeah.
this one is the order of the, like, the basic order of the universe too, like the orderly, the laws of the universe, physics, if you will, the molecules, the asteroids bumping in together, the planets and stars and that kind of stuff. Burkano, life, birth, rebirth, regeneration, silent sanctuary. Awaz means horse, and this teamwork or partnership, love, emotions, animals.
Mm-hmm.
Mana, mankind. We see kind of like a kind of like rock, plant, um, rock, plant, animal, human kind of thing going on here. Um, and
Hmm.
with this mind and memory, Hugin and Munin. You've got Lagaz, which is kind of like, for me, that represents like the imagination or the dream or the collective unconscious.
Yeah, the
It's like
wellspring.
the bigger mind, yeah, the well of Mimir, our collective. This is not just like mankind. This is like the something deeper that
Like the
is.
cosmic, like it's the cosmic wellspring of consciousnesses.
Well, yeah, like if you got mankind and we're together and we're these bodies that interact and have a greater order, well then you've got like 98% of those bodies are made of water, and Lagaz literally means water or lake,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things that go with that. And then the seed, which needs water to grow, but the seed is the masculine energy, sometimes to this feminine energy over here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually get into the masculine and feminine because I find that other authors do that plenty. It's a distraction from this particular narrative, but they do. It is something to think about. There's another symbol for Ingas, which is the one that looks more like a DNA or a helix,
Yeah,
and that's the younger Futhark's version, I believe. Um,
I always thought
so
it was just a sloppier way of, like if you
maybe
were
carving is sloppy, yeah,
if you were carving
yeah.
in stone, like if you were just carving it in stone, and you had to make that shape. That shape would be, you're just making straight lines, and the lines might end up sometimes being longer, sometimes they'd be shorter.
Yeah,
So
your chisel slips or whatever
so
you're
so you end
using your.
up with something more like that rather than just the center thing, because you're just I feel like it's almost an extension of necessity, or an extension of just the practicality of engraving these things into stones.
I think that's a valid perspective. You always have to remember that the symbol shapes were like engraved or chiseled, sometimes very crudely, and passed on like that. Then so the seed form is really important though, because it's like you're talking about the I Ching of passing on the information. Like it's encoded in the most elegant format possible, but from it, a tree can become a forest, which can become like a bed of life for
Mm.
and shelter for, and that's one seed has the potential. So it's potentiality. So this imagination and dreams and stuff leads to this potentiality of the seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we were talking about a little bit with the pyramids and the, things that have yet to exist at one point were imagination. See, there's this kind of progress here. And day, dagas, is often meant to be enlightenment. It's also invisibility. Light sheds light on things, but you don't really see the light itself. And if you
Mm.
do, you're kind of blinding yourself. You look at the sun, or you look at the your lamp, and it's just pointless because it hurts your eyes, right? But
Mm.
you don't you see the things in the light, and by the light, you don't see the light. So it's like enlightenment is this like shaking of this both this burden of needing to seek and also seeing what you've been looking for, or what you've been actually like that's been there all along. Um, it's also the day of reckoning, or the daybreak, where darkness has maybe come at some point during this story. Although there isn't a rune for darkness or moon or night or whatever. There's torch, but like you have to make sure there's actually no rune for the absence of light. There's like it's understood in the Elder Futhark, I think, as an absence. Darkness is an absence, not a thing in and of itself. Which
Mm-hmm.
is interesting. I find that there's not really much to say about the shadows and dark in here. And then Othala, which I put at the end because I feel that enlightenment is not an end goal in and of itself. It's bringing that thing again back, like Wonjo, to the self, or to the community, or in this way to the nation or the homeland, or the with the homeland being Earth, in this sense, which is heaven on earth, the legacy that we leave for the future, the inheritance that is ultimately in an ancestral kind of way. If we're being reborn, or our immortality is continued on through children and families into the future, we're only stealing from ourselves if we don't leave a positive legacy and we don't work
Yeah.
towards heaven on earth. We all have this feeling too that it's worth making society better. Like somehow, somehow the place that we live in is not good enough. It could be better. Like everybody I think has that like innate sense. And I think that's at the core of Othala, to arrange the estate and pass it on to the next generation in the best way you can.
And then begins this cycle anew.
The wealth and the luck that they gain without even realizing it. The entitled children that they are. So this can be represented in a circle for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a little story. Like I obviously go into in great detail in this course. There's a lot of stuff happening here. Um, but yeah,
Well, that's
that's
awesome.
what I've been working on.
What are the details about your course? Are you teaching it? What method are you using to teach it?
I'll be using like a online platform, maybe probably not Teachable, but Thinkific. It's just like
Okay.
some place you can share videos and downloads and content and audio, and have discussions on certain lessons, and maybe stagger the lessons so people can keep up with each other and stay
Mm-hmm.
on topic together. Like no one's doing Ewaz while the other one is doing, Thurazaz. Like I might do that and run it only like once in a while instead
Yeah,
of like letting them just pile in whenever they want, kind of thing. Um,
I really appreciate the depth of your thought about the runes because I've I've studied them for a long time myself, and it's rare that I've met anyone who's studied them more than me. You know, and so it's nice to talk to someone who's
I met a few people, thank you, but I've met a few people who have definitely studied them more than me,
yeah.
and it is embarrassing for me that I don't study them in the right way sometimes, I think. But no, I'm not into as much the you can tell like I'm not into the uh, like a Satru viewpoints or the Viking mythology as much as I am the actual meaning behind the runes. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about these things?
I
What
think
story are
that's
we telling ourselves?
I think that's a more pure way to do it for divination purposes. I mean, it's tied to a culture and a people, but the thing is that it's reflective of. Uh, I'm looking for my tarot deck because this is very interesting. This is something I want to share with you because you were talking about how you don't really connect with the tarot deck very well. But so the tarot deck, it has the 22 major arcana cards. Like there's the hero font there, but the 22 major arcana cards are actually parallel to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
That card again, slower. The Arcana.
The,
Oh, so you've got the old Arcana. Yeah, is that what's
this
that called again?
it's called
Major Arcana.
the Rider Waite.
The Rider Waite. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had my mom had those when I was a kid, so I'm familiar with all the shapes and stuff, but I haven't used them since I was fascinated with them, just as I was fascinated with everything when I was little.
Yeah.
But those are there's so much imagery in those in that particular deck.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
they're actually I think they're amazing. But what's interesting to me is that there's there's in the major arcana that is an alphabet. The major arcana is literally an alphabet. It's literally 22 letters. It's the 22 letters of Hebrew. Uh, so that parallels the runes, but the runes are adapted a little bit differently. The tarot deck goes a different direction, and they take the Hebrew alphabet and then they take the 10 numbers in four different spheres of elements of the four elements, and then they take the zodiac. Uh,
That is something I would like to get on when I'm done making a very comprehensive rune course. I would like to make a kind of side rune course for specifically for coming from tarot, like divination from tarot to
mhm.
divination to runes, and the differences and methods and similarities, because there's a lot of people cross the two or are coming from tarot, and I find they don't know much about the runes, but they stumble across it and are interested. Like a good portion of my audience are very familiar with tarot. Um, when they come as newbies, I mean, like they've come from somewhere. They don't just appear from nowhere. The survey I did was really useful in finding out like a little more about that. But
Do you want
yeah,
to
tarot's really important.
turn your
Obvious.
camera back on, or just
Well, I was
because?
gonna share a
Oh, okay.
song.
Oh, yeah. No
Um,
worries. Yeah. Well, I think tarot is important, but it's important in the same way that runes are. And what I like to emphasize personally is that essentially they're two traditions of the same thing. They have the same root and the same um, type of weight behind the letters. Behind the the alphabet. You know,
so
and
I almost forgot that I had that on. It's a shame I don't know how to put them both at the same time on Discord if you can even do that.
Oh, I don't know.
I'd have to have maybe two. I'd have to have maybe two accounts, or
Maybe that's
I don't know.
true. Yeah, maybe you'd have to have two accounts. I don't know.
We can chill to this music like together at another time, not at the podcast.
Well, if you want to share it
Yeah.
with the podcast, it's fine.
Well, I have there's a Rune Songs for the 21st Century album, which was one of my first albums getting into music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a popular one on, you can find it on Spotify and all that, Bandcamp and YouTube, and it has, each of the runes has a name, and then I tried to kind of make a little song that most went with that. Uh, and the thing about that album was I was really like struggling at the time, but I wanted to prove to myself I could make a 24 song album
Yeah.
while I was struggling. And I did.
Will you play me the song that's for the Ing rune?
Yeah,
I
a song for the Ingrun for sure.
that's the one I just drew, so I decided to draw a rune and ask you to play that song. I'm just interested in hearing it.
I'm gonna open up Spotify here, and then share my screen. That's my wife coming in there.
Hello.
Well, she's got the dog's very excited to see her, and where's Spotify? There we go. Share it.
I don't even know if sharing audio works, how it works in Discord.
Oh, you just have to Rune Songs for the 21st Century. Here's the album. And we've got Ingas. It should stream like.
Yeah, it is streaming.
And I have the rights to this music, so it won't take you down off of YouTube.
Nice. Cool, thank you. Did you record instruments, or is this synthesized?
It's not synthesized. It's all sound libraries.
Oh, so it's like samples.
Yeah, many samples together. Yeah.
Mm.
They map instruments, and put them, all the sounds mapped to keyboards and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can almost feel that energy of like the seed on a journey, getting planted and starting to.
It's got little sounds, little tin 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 and tin tin. Like they're tiny, but they blossom in the earth.
Do you ever listen to Mongolian throat singing?
I used to. I mean, I've heard it. I've heard it. This is similar. It's just shamanic, though. I don't think that.
I like to do that kind of thing myself. That kind of singing is very connects us to the earth,
We got a very trance-like journey going on. These are meditation tracks, kind of.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to listen to this album. Just kind of put it on and listen to
I
it.
get like a lot of positive feedback around it. I like my other music a little better, but this one seems to be the popular one with people.
Well, maybe because the runes have such heavy value and meaning on their own.
Well, each of these songs is much simpler than I'm used to making my music.
Mm-hmm.
I like to do very complicated things.
Okay.
And then I really toned it down for this album. Like there's only a few things going on at the same time. A lot of repetition,
Yeah.
But that's where it brings you into the zone.
Yeah. I think I like that it has that seed growing energy, you know.
We should do Isa as well, ice,
Okay.
because you'll see immediately the difference. Like there's a very cold, tinkly, I'm in an iceberg or a glacier kind of feeling to that one.
Yeah.
I'll just let this one wrap up because it's almost done anyway.
So, do you sell physical copies of this album, or do you just have it on?
It's on Bandcamp to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what are we doing now? Isa, here we go. So we got kind of like an underwater sailboat maybe feeling coming up here.
It's interesting. It almost sounds like, kind of has like a hurdy-gurdy sound to it.
I have hurdy-gurdies, but yeah, like the chanters and stuff.
Yeah.
But this is a lot of synthesis here.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's like ice crystals forming.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm. It's interesting how many different media you've explored runes so deeply in so many different forms. Where you wrote songs for them, and you wrote a book about them. That's pretty cool.
They helped me. They really helped me figure life out, and I want to pass that on. Like they were actually useful to me, and that's why when I said earlier, I think that they have a use and they can have impact on people's lives. If I can even transmit a little bit of that to someone else who's in a time of need, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic for them, like they're a path, a genuine spiritual path away, and I have the honor of trying to communicate that to people. The challenge, but also the honor. Like I've been given that kind of task,
Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing, I think, to be able to spend your time teaching, to be able to offer something so valuable. I think that the runes and things of that old kind of secret mystery are of kind of immeasurable value almost. You could give someone more of a gift by teaching them about runes than just about, if you could give them a pile of gold or teach them about runes, eventually they'd profit more from the runes, I think.
We're talking about gift now. This is one that I composed after I got married. I mean, I composed this entire album after I got married, but the Gebu rune, the gift, the sacred union, is one of my favorites on the album because I would have played it at my wedding if I could have, it didn't exist yet, but it sounds kind of like a wedding song. I'll get into it here. This one's very kind, and this will be the last one I share right now, at least on your podcast. But these songs are very popular, so I know they go over well with people who are interested in the runes.
Yeah, it's awesome that you found popularity with that. I've played music, but I think the quality of my recordings is not great, so I never got too popular with it. I do love to play music though. It's a very big. It's an important part of spiritual expression, I think. Yeah, it's like there's definitely a tender giving feeling.
And a giving of oneself. And celebration.
Mm-hmm. I see what you mean. Yeah. And an anticipation, you know.
Yeah. You can picture me standing there, waiting for her. I mean, there's always the gift of the rings, the exchange of the rings at the ceremony, right? Or the hand binding, in modern times at least.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing this, your music with us.
Thank you for listening. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes, this stuff, because, well, for me, it has like that power, right? Like, then it really just communicates something that I can't say in words.
That's a good way to learn runes, you know. There's things that you can't communicate in words, and that's what you have to connect to the letters so that you can start communicating in words. That must have been how early man felt, you know.
Yeah.
They're like, there's something that I feel that I just can't express, and so they invented language in order to be able to express it. And then they were like, there's something I feel I just can't express with this language. They invented writing.
I bet you singing came first.
Singing
like
before.
Just singing before language, yeah. I bet we came out of song. It just makes sense to me.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, listen to the birds. Humans were probably like parrots or like some monkeys where they mimic sounds. And humans are very intelligent, impressionable, you know.
Yeah.
Creatures.
Have you ever seen the video of the water drumming? It's a tribe in a Congo, or it's some water drumming. They like the women hit the water with a certain kind of cupped hands.
Oh. And
it's beautiful. Like they all do it together and they sing, and let's turn on. Yeah, they sing and they're going, and they all do it.
I haven't seen that, but
side of a river. Oh, this is the kind of thing I think that like must go back really, really far. You know, like, and you see it just done today and on a YouTube video, and you're just like, people take it for granted. Oh, that's cool. And I'm like, whoa. That is ancient.
Yeah. There's a lot of those. That is one of those things that I like about runes, is that I just feel like they go so deep into just the basics of human expression, like the basic urges of human expression. And when we even choose certain shapes, like Gabo is a good example of just the cross shape, or the X shape, is like so indicative of a meeting place, or a cross.
It's like Christmas. Like some people do the Xmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Xmas. It's just another thing that I don't think people realize they do, but makes sense.
It's kind of funny because people act in accordance with some of these laws or like esoteric things, they act in accordance with them without even realizing that they exist. And in that case, these things are more, well, they're art, but they're also science. You know.
That's what I call them: principle, laws, and energies. Or powers,
Mm-hmm.
principle, laws, and powers. And I avoid I avoid the word energy as much as I can, because like everything is energy. Like when,
Yeah.
like in quantum physics, like it actually is everything is energy. But principles, laws, and powers. And when we find principles that work and laws that must be followed and powers that we can exert, no matter whether we're using the runes or not, no matter whether we're Christian or Buddhist or atheist, these fall into a particular pattern, and there's things that we'll discover, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I find is uniting, and I very much have grown into a unifying. As much as I'm kind of an agnostic, because the runes mean mystery and unknown, and you have to kind of be a little agnostic to be a mystic. Um, the unity I see in all things is really growing in my teachings, and thus the universal nature of the reconstructed Elder Futhark, um, coming from and recognizing maybe its origins, but not emphasizing them,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing more that these are symbols of the past for the curious of today, for the people of tomorrow.
Yeah. That's. I mean, it's important to carry on tradition for that reason, because it's there's I feel like there's a genetic memory that we receive, but there's also like a cultural, and there's a cultural memory that comes along with these objects, because they've passed through so many people's hands, and every soul that has touched their shape has imparted some of itself on the rune, and has had some of the rune imparted on themselves.
You have an impact, like people do. I find people do underestimate their impact. The We each have so much power, so much power. We're each the center of the universe, folded in on itself to love itself and observe itself. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a wormhole right there. Like we're looking for wormholes. Look, like right here, behind your eyes. In a very physical way, here we are at one on a quantum level with everything else, but observing it.
Yeah.
Discovering it. That's really, when it gets down to it. There's nothing more intense than that experience that we can imagine. We don't imagine. We take it completely for granted. That like that's what's happening every moment.
Yeah, we do have a tendency to. Well, we get used to it and then we take it for granted, but it's.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the runes are a good way to remember. A lot of people take them every day and do something with it, and you can't look at everything all at once, because you can't see behind your head. You have to turn your
Mhm.
head around. And the runes are a way of like examining a little piece of life, a little piece of the universe, one at a time. Like if I go into my bag and what am I going to focus on today, and I come up with like the journey. What am I going to go for a car
Mhm.
ride? Am I on a certain path? And I might get curious and like draw like another something or other. A journey towards a sacred union, or a gift, or my inner talents, realizing my inner talents or gifts, because they can mean inner gifts that you can give to others as well. And
Mhm.
then success, mastery of those, a journey to mastering my innate talents. And that's a it's a story that I made up based
Yeah.
on some, but it's not hard. It's just that we got to let go a little bit of like worrying about what they mean exactly.
Hmm.
In other words, I'm saying like, stop going to my site
Yeah.
and looking them up all the time. But, memorize some stuff and then don't be afraid to imagine. Don't be afraid to make up the story about your life because like that's what you're doing all the time anyway. You just don't realize it.
Yeah, I identify with that very strongly. The idea of I feel like the idea of becoming an initiate or the becoming initiated into the mysteries is elevating the self from a position of being like someone that life happens to being someone who is a co-creator of their own life. Like they become a partner of God and say, "Well, I'm going to cooperate with you, and we're going to create this."
Well, you definitely have to either cooperate or roll with the punches. Sometimes COVID-19 is a serious challenge for all of us, and uh, it's forced me to stay at home and work on this stuff. But I saw on my website traffic when the lockdown started happening, that there was just this spike. People are on their computers, on their phones, wondering what to do next, what the future
Mhm.
held. And you could see it in the graphs. And I was like, I have to do more for these people. I have
Mhm.
to.
I
Just the
actually
data tells me.
I felt the same thing, and I started reaching out to people in my community or just on my social media communities because you can't talk to people in real life anymore apparently. But the I started reaching out to them and offering them to do tarot, rune, I Ching, or horoscope charts, or to read for them uh, for free or for donation, whatever they want. Because I think, well, everyone's having a hard time right now, so I don't want to be too too greedy or anything, but I think that it's a great gift to give to someone is it's just that gift of knowledge and a gift of if you can give a good reading, or I mean if you can do a reading for someone or for yourself, it it can give you a lot of solace or a lot of it can calm your anxieties a little, you know.
Remember the Anglo-Saxon rune rose. That first rune Fehu is actually fee, and we use that word. You pay a fee.
Hmm.
And the Fehu is wealth or mobile property, and initial conditions are like if you want to go on this journey with me, like in terms of reading and charging for a reading,
Hmm.
the runes kind of say like, especially in the later days, it's like pay it a fee. It's the polite thing to do, or it's the necessary step on those on that journey of the runes that we're going to go through. So it's not anything to feel guilty or greedy
Oh
about.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
maybe if you're some television evangelist telling people to, just not wear masks and go rub their noses on everything. I don't know, like, and they give you all their money. Who knows? Like, I don't watch these people, so I
oh
don't
yeah.
know. But I had a long time I wanted to I had a hard time like separating spirituality from uh career, um in that I felt that if I was doing spirituality I couldn't do it as a career,
Mm.
or if I was doing a career it couldn't be about spirituality, you know
Hmm.
but in actuality, this is the spiritual world. It's not the material world.
Yeah.
The material world, even according to many religions, is samsara, or an illusion. It's a test or a
Hmm.
place to play. Um, and the things we get attached to in the material are there to actually test our spirit. Um, how can you not um, include wealth with teaching? Teaching is
Yeah.
valuable, like, and I'm coming to terms with it, and I'm being encouraged by a community of people who I've long served, and they really like blow me away sometimes. I had a month where I had to do a GoFundMe because I wanted to work on a lot of content on the runes. But if I did, I couldn't do my music, which was paying my bills at the time. Like I
Mhm.
had to spend time doing this, and it really is intensive. It takes a lot out of me to write some of this stuff and think about it. Especially Hagalaz a couple months ago. I did it before all this happened, as
Mm.
if, this was going to happen. I was stuck on that part of my book, and it was like drawing, like taking an arrow out of me, like I just had to yank and write it down on the page with
Mm.
the tip of the arrow, and it was so difficult. But then I got it done, and um, this was the kind of thing with the GoFundMe that I was able to do. Um, I think it was like this would have been like about 2 years ago. I didn't need much. I just asked. I have a large mailing list, and I asked, and about like 10 or 12 people um, pitched in some things. But I was really astonished at the it wasn't small amounts of money sometimes that people gave me, and I didn't say like, oh, I'm going to give you CDs and T-shirts. I just said like, look, I need help right now because I'm in a hard time in my spiritual path, and I want to get this to you. And they responded. It's like, ask and you shall receive. um, you deserve when you're spreading this knowledge and this spiritual um, well-being to others. You deserve to be compensated. Like if they expect you to live and be able to sit there and do it for them, they need to also recognize that like they have to fill your little beggar bowl a little bit, like the bowl that you're handing out, or
Yeah.
pay the fee. um
I actually did live. I did live that way for a while. Literally, I mean, literally lived with. I would just play guitar on the street, and at the time,
Grass, yeah.
what was that?
Bluegrass. So you play some bluegrass.
Yeah, yeah. I was playing my guitar on the street and in Reno, Nevada, and I was living in my van down by the river, literally,
Mm.
like, and I was playing every day to make enough money to buy a loaf of bread and a jug of water, and then
Wow, that's
anything that I made past that, I would give away to the other homeless people.
wow.
So
That's
the
really
so because the thing is that what I was trying to teach myself and what I was trying to learn about is how much do you really need to live?
inspiring.
What can you get by with? And what I learned was you can get by with a lot less than what
You think,
you
yeah.
think. Yeah, and right now, I mean, I live in a great house in a great place in Oregon. I'm moving down. I'm in the process of moving right now, moving back to my a town that I went to high school and college, Reno, Nevada, and it's strange to be doing that, but it's interesting how when I put myself in a position to be just open to the universe and be like, well, whatever's going to come is going to come. I wound up with a job at Intel that I worked at for a year and a half, and it was a great job. And then now I'm just going back down to Reno, and I've been really working on my podcast stuff, and been working on trying to get more knowledge out to more people, because I think that right now is a great, well, coronavirus stuff is a lot of bad stuff in general, but there's a silver lining or a plus side in that many people are in a spiritual state where they're receptive. Uh,
They're learning because they have to reskill. Like a lot of these jobs that existed prior to this catastrophe are just not going to exist. They're not going to survive. The good old days Like one of my friends said, this is the beginning, the true beginning to the 21st century. What we've all known is kind of happening. Well,
Mm.
it's happening, you know. And that means that like when we're a bit older, we may look back on these times and tell our children or the younger people, you know, things were a lot different, and you should be grateful, and maybe we're a little sorry, or
Well,
I don't know.
I definitely.
It'll be interesting, but you know, pollution has stopped. I saw pictures of LA without smog.
Isn't that great?
You could see the water, like the fish in the water around Venice. Um,
That's
we
great
might have
too.
a we might have a cooler summer for once. Who knows? Like who knows what'll happen, right? Like smaller hurricanes. We'll really have to see because it's all interconnected, and the fact that we're not just flying through the air all the time, and the boats aren't disturbing the water, the whales might be able to hear each other.
That's
You
true.
know,
That's
imagine that, like the noise in the ocean, and then that calms down, and then their sounds travel farther, and they can meet up, and there might be like a resurgence in whale populations.
that
Like
would be great.
serious stuff. And there's you know, right before this, I think the major headlines in the news was this Greta Thunberg ordeal with
Mm.
Trump calling her, you know, being jealous of her being the Times Person of the Year or whatever, and all this, or like it was dramatic, but it was the young people who were really concerned about the environment, and she kind of got out of the limelight. She stepped away from that for, you know, what seemed like a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden, here you go, here's a pandemic, and all the things that like people wanted, you know, a cleaner environment, and less smog and less pollution, you know, stuff like that. It kind of like been forced to happen just as a consequence of us like slowing down, and
Mhm.
we may end up liking a lot of what's going on. We may end up liking spending more time with family, not commuting 2 hours to work, working from home, being entrepreneurs, talking to each other for a change, even if it's over the internet. You know, listening to podcasts, right?
Mhm.
This was already happening, but like people, more and more people discovering it, right? So,
Absolutely. Actually, I think that in that sense, or to put it another way, that the Renaissance in Europe was preceded by the Great Plague. You know, the 1/3 of the people in Europe died, and then they had a great Renaissance because of how much it changed their psychology.
it was half. It was half.
It was half. Okay.
And over a period of like, you know, what was it, 10 years or something, right? With a couple of like,
Uh,
the Spanish flu came in waves too.
yeah.
But that was a different story. Yeah, I read a bit about the Black Plague, and how connected that is to invention and innovation because of the necessity, and that's probably like very tied to the saying necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like
Mhm.
they really needed to do something about the labor shortages, about, you know, all kinds of technical problems and feeding people, and with a shortage of manual labor, um, you know. So there's always change, and Hagalaz is a rune of acceptance, surrender, and opportunity, as well as crisis, catastrophe, and um, you know, basic disruption, radical change. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Sometimes
it,
it hails on your 4th of July barbecue.
well, the hailstone comes early and melts, and then you get the water for your crops anyway, right?
Mhm.
Um, So it's a mixed blessing. It can clear some of the stuff out of the way for us. That's the metaphor, at least.
I see this situation as being very much that the mixed blessing. It's or a a curse with a silver lining. It's not all bad.
Yeah, it depends where you're at. Yeah, the geopolitical landscape is shifting, but like at least we are literally all in it together, and it's not a war against ourselves. It's a war. It's actually a peace. It's a fight again to be healthy together,
Yeah,
and I hope that continues. I really hope that that is something that we take away from this. We can move from as a civilization from Fehu wealth, the pursuit, the imbalance of Fehu, the pursuit of wealth to Urus, which is much more enduring and healthy and sustainable and surviving. Because we're on a crash course before this. We're using up all our resources. We couldn't keep that pace up.
it's interesting that you say that because when I'm getting back down to Reno, I have a lot of friends down there who are very skilled at yoga or fitness or massage therapy or various martial arts kind of things, and I've been talking to them, and we're going to try to be as part of this broader community that's related to this podcast is a lot of health things. How can we all be healthier and be our healthiest self? People talk about being their best self or living their best life. That's the that's a very it's a powerful idea to try to live your best life. And I try to think about even every moment, try to improve it so that it leaves better than it arrived. And if you can do that more moments than not, then you're on an upward trend.
Two steps forward, one step back sometimes, right? Like it's inevitable that we can't like just go straight into the camera. We have to come back a little bit, but we
Yeah.
make progress. Um,
You can't go full
but
bore all the time. Yeah.
yeah. So I better get going, but
Okay.
if that I have a little more time if you want to talk about something to wrap up or anything. I have maybe 10 more minutes, but what do you think? Like, can I pump my site like
Yeah. Go ahead. Why don't you tell?
HTTPS runesecrets.com? It's got a 12-year history of being some very useful notes for divination and contemplation. I've got my Book of Rune Secrets, which you can find on Amazon, and there's links to it on the site. It goes by Tyriel. Um, and I've got on runesecrets.com, there's links to my music, links to the Discord channel, and most importantly, links to the email newsletter, which is infrequent, but it's going to pick up. And I'm doing a lot of things like we were talking about here with Lex. Um, yeah, I hope that anybody watching this in the future, and Lex, you are already part of the Rune Seekers community. I hope that you'll come join us and share your perspectives, share your learning, share your path, and we're in this together. So
Yeah.
I'm always happy to meet new people. Always, always.
Well, it's very nice to speak to you screen to screen for the first
FaceTime to
time.
FaceTime or
Uh,
Discord to Discord.
Yeah, I very much I appreciate your work, and I've been using Rune Secrets like I said, I've been using it as a reference for a number of years now, for my own research, for my own work, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate that you're working on building a community, that you're working on, on helping people, on using knowledge to help people, and that's what this show is about, and that's what all of what I am doing with my life is about as well. So I'm very we're blessed to have had you on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. This was something that I don't do very often, but I'm trying to like practice that, and hopefully I did okay, and maybe we'll do it again soon.
Yeah. Well, it was.
Okay.
I thought it was a good time. So
Okay. Me too.
hey, have a nice day.
You too. Bye.